Welcome. Find a comfortable place, perhaps lying down or settling back in your chair. Let your breathing slow and allow your thoughts to drift as we step back into a quieter world. Tonight, we will journey into the life of the samurai. Not the flashing blades of battle that fill modern imagination, but the slow rhythm of their everyday existence. Beyond the armor and the sword, samurai were human beings who lived ordinary yet structured lives. They rose with the sun, they tended to household affairs, they taught their children, and they moved through a society shaped by rules, rituals, and quiet discipline. Over the next couple of hours, we will explore this simple life in 4 parts. First, we will immerse ourselves in the daily routines of a samurai household, what it felt like to wake, to eat, to train, and to rest. Then we will follow the story of a single figure moving through one life to see how those rhythms shaped a person's journey. After that, we will wander into the cultural mysteries surrounding the samurai, artifacts, traditions, and subtle philosophies that still puzzle and inspire us today. And finally, we will contrast the humble routines of the ordinary warrior with the more refined lives of the elite, and with the peasants who served them, to see the full spectrum of this layered society. As you listen, let your mind soften. Imagine wooden floors polished smooth by bare feet, the distant call of a crow over a tiled roof, or the faint scent of tea rising from a clay cup. Nothing is urgent here. The past unfolds slowly, and you are simply carried along. Imagine yourself in a quiet Japanese village centuries ago. The sun has not yet fully risen, and the world lies in a pale silvery light. A cool mist drifts across the fields, clinging to the thatched roofs of wooden homes. In one such house lives a samurai and his family. Their lives are shaped not by constant battles or clashing swords, but by rhythm, by discipline, and by an enduring cycle of duties that repeat with the changing seasons. Inside, the household is just beginning to stir. The walls, made of wooden frames and translucent paper, let in a gentle glow as the first rays of morning creep across the horizon. The sound is not silence exactly, but a layered stillness, the faint chirp of a night insect, fading away the soft shuffle of straw sandals as someone moves quietly across tatami mats, the distant call of a crow echoing from the fields. The samurai rises early, well before the village is fully awake. He unfolds himself from his bedding, soft mats rolled neatly in the corner, and begins his morning with small gestures of order. The futon is smoothed, folded, and carefully set aside. This act of tidiness, repeated each day, is more than habit. It is a reminder that discipline begins with the smallest of tasks. He kneels for a moment of quiet reflection. Perhaps he recites a verse from a Chinese classic text, or simply breathes in the cool, clean air that drifts through the open wooden lattice. There is no need for haste. His life is not governed by the frantic ticking of clocks, but by the sun, by the rhythm of nature, and by the duties owed to his household and his lord. Elsewhere in the house, his wife tends the morning fire. The faint crackle of kindling mixes with the soft bubbling of a pot. Steam rises, carrying with it the aroma of rice, nutty, simple, sustaining. A bowl of miso soup simmers, fragrant with seaweed and tofu. These scents mingle with the woody smell of the home itself, the tatami mats with their faint, grassy sweetness, the polished cedar beams, the hint of smoke from the hearth. Children are stirring too. They wash their faces with cold water from a wooden basin, suppressing playful chatter out of respect for their father's solemn presence. They are learning, in small ways, the importance of quiet composure. Even the young are expected to model restraint. Breakfast in this household is modest. A bowl of steaming rice, a cup of soup, perhaps some pickled radish or cucumber. The family kneels together, seated low at a lacquered wooden tray. The meal is eaten in silence or near silence, punctuated only by the faint sound of chopsticks and the occasional sip of tea. The samurai's posture is straight, his movements deliberate. Eating is not indulgence but ritual, an extension of discipline. His children observe closely, learning from the way he holds his chopsticks, from the measured pace at which he eats. Even here, in the intimacy of family life, there is no collapse into casualness. Life is ceremony. Life is order. When the meal is done, bowls are washed, surfaces cleaned, and the household shifts seamlessly into the day's labors. Outside in the small courtyard, the samurai begins his practice. The air is fresh, the ground still damp with morning dew. He lifts a wooden practice sword, heavy in the hand, and begins to strike against a training post. The rhythm is steady. Strike, pause, step, breathe, strike again. Each motion is slow, deliberate, practiced endlessly. It is not the thrill of combat that drives him, but the pursuit of perfection. Each stroke of the blade must mirror the quiet discipline of his mind. His breathing aligns with movement. Inhale as he raises the weapon. Exhale as he lets it fall. The courtyard echoes with the thud of wood against wood, but even this is not harsh. It has the steady cadence of a drum, marking the passage of time. Nearby, his sons may watch or take up smaller wooden swords themselves, imitating their father's stance. Training does not end with the sword. The bow is strung, its curves smooth and taut. The samurai draws the string back, slowly, with deep focus. The arrow releases in silence, slicing the air before sinking into a target set against a wall of straw. He practices again, not for battle, but for balance. Archery is meditation as much as skill. Later there may be time with the brush. A sheet of crisp paper is laid before him. He dips the brush into black ink and begins to write. The strokes of calligraphy echo the strokes of a sword, flowing, firm, deliberate. Each character must be balanced, each curve alive with intention. The warrior's hand, steady in combat, must also be steady here. In this way, the arts are not separate from martial life, they are extensions of the same discipline. By midday, his attention turns to practical matters. The samurai is not always a fighter. More often, he is an administrator, a land steward, a mediator of disputes. He might walk the boundaries of rice fields, noting the growth of crops. The air smells of damp earth and water from irrigation channels. Farmers bow as he passes, their clothes stained with soil, their faces weathered by sun and labor. Though of higher class, the samurai's life is tied to theirs. His livelihood depends on their harvest. Their loyalty depends on his fairness. If summoned, he travels to the nearby castle town. The journey is quiet, perhaps through forest paths lined with cedar trees, their tall trunks filtering sunlight into shifting patterns on the ground. In the castle, he attends his lord, offering counsel or reporting on village matters. Words are spoken carefully. Bowing is precise. Status and ritual govern every interaction. Sometimes disputes arise, arguments over land boundaries or grievances between peasants. The samurai listens calmly, weighing the words of both sides. His decision must be just, for justice is part of his duty, as binding as swordsmanship. Returning home, the afternoon is devoted to teaching and learning. He may instruct his sons in martial practice, showing them not only how to strike, but how to breathe, how to stand, how to calm their minds. Lessons are patient, repetitive, always returning to the idea that strength is meaningless without control. Daughters, too, are guided. They are taught household management, how to keep accounts of rice and goods, how to write with elegance, how to recite poetry with clarity. In some families, they may also learn defense with the naginata, a long curved blade, not for aggression, but for protection of the home. The house itself is a classroom. Every moment is a lesson in order, respect, and continuity. As the sun lowers, the world softens. The smell of burning wood drifts again from the hearth. Lanterns are lit, their warm glow casting shifting patterns across the paper walls. Shadows stretch and sway with each movement. Dinner is served much like breakfast: rice, soup, vegetables, perhaps fish, if the season and stores allow. Conversation is subdued, often limited to reflections on the day or discussions of duties yet to come. Outside, the sounds of insects rise with the cooling air, creating a gentle backdrop of life beyond the walls. When the meal is done, there may be time for quiet enjoyment. Poetry is recited, stories retold, or music played on a bamboo flute. These sounds are not raucous but gentle, winding their way into the night. They soothe, they remind the household of beauty, even within lives bound by duty. Finally, the household prepares to rest. Bedding is unrolled, lanterns extinguished. The samurai lies once more on the tatami mat, his body weary, but his mind steady. The air is cooler now, filled with the scent of night air, drifting through half-open shutters. He thinks perhaps of the wider world, of battles past, of alliances shifting in distant provinces, but within these walls the rhythm holds. Discipline, ritual, and simplicity frame his life as they frame the lives of countless others across Japan. And so the day ends as it began, quiet, measured, and immersed in the unchanging flow of duty. Tomorrow will come, and with it the same rhythm, the same repetition, the same comforting patterns. To understand Musashi's life, we must first pause and imagine the Japan into which he was born. It was the late 1500s, an age of shifting power. Lords or daimyo commanded vast lands. Castles rose above rice fields, their wooden beams dark against the sky. Farmers bent their backs beneath the sun, their harvest supporting the samurai class above them. The land was weary of wars that had raged for more than a century, yet peace had not fully taken root. Into this landscape, a child named Musashi was born. He entered a world where honor was as essential as breath, where the path of the sword was not simply a skill, but a way of existing. His life would become a reflection of this world, part battlefield, part study hall, part wandering journey. Little is known with certainty about Musashi's earliest years, but fragments remain. He lost his mother when he was still very young, and his father, a strict and distant man, soon faded from his life. The boy was left in the care of relatives. His beginnings were not marked by comfort, but by solitude. Imagine him as a small boy, perhaps standing near the banks of a river, the water moving steadily past. The countryside around him would have been quiet, fields of rice glistening in the sun, small shrines hidden beneath trees, mountains always in the distance. A wooden sword, too heavy for his young arms, rested in his hands. Even then, he practiced the gestures that would one day make his name known. His education was typical of a child of samurai lineage. He learned to read and write, not in a hurried classroom, but under the careful guidance of elders who valued patience. He copied characters again and again, the brush heavy with ink, until his strokes grew steady. In those same lessons, he absorbed the idea that martial strength and cultured learning were inseparable. At 13, Musashi faced his first duel. It is difficult for us now, centuries later, to imagine a boy so young stepping into combat, but the rhythms of samurai life made it so. Picture a clearing in the countryside, the ground damp with morning dew. The air is tense, filled with the quiet presence of onlookers. His opponent was older, stronger, and more experienced, but Musashi, though just a boy, carried with him a calm intensity. His wooden sword, gripped with both hands, was not polished or refined. It was simple, like the boy himself. The fight was swift. Musashi emerged victorious. The outcome would mark him, not as a child any longer, but as a warrior in training. From that moment, his path was set, the path of testing himself against others, of learning through contest, and of refining his skill through the crucible of duels. After this, Musashi began to wander. His life became a rhythm of travel, training, and challenge. The Japan of his day was a patchwork of villages and castle towns, connected by winding roads that cut through forests and rice fields. Imagine him walking these paths, sandals dusty, the long arc of his sword at his side. Nights were spent in humble inns, where the smoke of cooking fires clung to the rafters, and the chatter of travelers filled the air. At times he may have slept under the stars, the sound of insects and the wind in the pines his only companions. Wherever he went, he sought out other swordsmen. His duels were not for sport, but for growth. In each, he tested new techniques, refined his timing, studied the rhythm of combat. He fought with swords of wood and swords of steel, sometimes in fields, sometimes in courtyards, sometimes before the gates of temples. Always he sought the moment where calm met precision. By some accounts, Musashi fought over 60 duels in his lifetime. He is said to have never lost. Yet his life was not consumed by fighting alone. The spaces between duels were just as important. Long stretches of travel, study, and quiet practice. These are the spaces that shaped his mind, teaching him that the warrior's path was not solely about striking down an enemy, but about cultivating balance. One duel, however, became legend, his encounter with Sasaki Kojiro. It took place in 1612 on a small island now called Ganryu-jima. The air was thick with salt from the sea. The waves lapped steadily at the shore, indifferent to the tension gathering on the sand. Musashi arrived late. Some say it was a tactic to unsettle his opponent. Others say it was simply his way, unconcerned with convention. He carried a weapon not of steel but of wood, an oar he had carved during the boat ride to the island, shaped into a long, heavy sword. Kojiro was famous for his long-bladed sword technique, swift and elegant. The two men faced each other, the water stretching endlessly behind them, gulls circling overhead. The duel itself was brief, a matter of moments. Musashi struck decisively. Kojiro fell. But if we pause here, what is most striking is not the violence, but the quiet that followed. The waves continued to wash against the island. The gulls continued their flight. And Musashi, victorious, did not linger to revel in triumph. He turned away, as he always did, to continue his journey. To think of Musashi only as a duelist is to miss much of his life. In his wandering years, he also studied painting, producing delicate ink sketches of birds, landscapes, and quiet scenes of nature. His brush strokes were simple, yet full of life, echoing the calm precision of his sword work. He carved wooden statues with the same deliberate patience. He meditated in temples, bowing before incense and silence. Imagine him in a quiet room, perhaps sitting before a paper screen, the ink brush in his hand. Outside, a bamboo grove rattles softly in the wind. Each stroke on the page is made with the same focus he once gave to dueling. For Musashi, the arts and the martial path were not separate. They were reflections of the same discipline. In his later years, Musashi withdrew from wandering life. He lived in seclusion, in caves and remote dwellings where time passed slowly, marked by the sun rising and falling beyond the mouth of stone shelters. It was in these years that he wrote his most enduring work, Go-Rin no Sho, the Book of Five Rings. This was not merely a manual for fighters, it was a meditation on rhythm, timing, and perception. He wrote of seeing with the eye that does not blink, of aligning oneself with the flow of events, of the importance of balance between stillness and action. Picture him seated in the dim light of his cave, brush in hand, the smell of ink sharp in the air. The pages before him filled slowly, each character deliberate. The book was not written for glory, but as a final offering of wisdom, distilled from a lifetime of discipline. In 1645, Musashi's life came to its quiet end. He prepared himself with the same composure that had marked his duels and his writings. He chose to meet death seated upright, his sword at his side, facing the inevitable with dignity. And then the man who had wandered so far, who had fought so many, who had painted and written and carved, passed into history. His story lingers not because of the violence, but because of the balance he sought. Musashi's life reminds us that the samurai were not defined only by their battles, but by their devotion to rhythm, order, and the search for calm in all things. Imagine walking into a museum today, where glass cases display relics of a vanished world. Swords that once gleamed on the battlefield now rest in quiet stillness. Suits of armor, their lacquer cracked with age, stand empty, like silent guardians of memory. Scrolls of faded ink, once held in the steady hands of a samurai, carry words and images across centuries. These objects are more than artifacts, they are whispers, fragments of lives lived long ago. Each carries mystery, not because we know nothing of them, but because we can never quite step fully into the world they once belonged to. The sword that rests in silence once sang through the air. The armor once bore the warmth of a body. The scroll once guided a hand across the page. Among these artifacts, none is more iconic than the sword. The katana, long, curved, elegant, was not only a tool of war, but also a symbol of spirit. To hold a sword was to carry identity. The forging of such a blade was itself a ritual. Imagine a blacksmith's workshop, the hiss of hot iron plunged into water, the sharp scent of smoke and metal, the rhythmic ringing of hammer on steel. The swordsmith worked with patience, folding the steel again and again, creating layers invisible to the eye, yet vital to its strength. Even in use, the sword was wrapped in ritual. It was polished with care, stored in its sheath when not drawn, and sometimes passed down through generations, becoming not just a weapon, but a family treasure. To this day, no two swords are exactly alike, and each bears the subtle fingerprint of its maker. But here lies the mystery. For all the sword's symbolic weight, most samurai did not draw it often. Their lives, as we have seen, were filled more with routine, with management, with teaching, with ceremony. The sword was as much an idea as it was a reality, an emblem of readiness, a reminder of restraint. Picture a suit of yoroi armor, lacquered plates bound together with silk cords, layered like scales, gleaming faintly in the light. The helmet, with its curved crest, gave the warrior a presence that was both human and more than human. Archaeologists who study such armor often find evidence of care. Silk cords replaced over time, lacquer reapplied, dents hammered out. These signs tell us that armor was not only built, but maintained, repaired, lived in. And yet, when you see a suit today in a museum standing upright but empty, it has a ghostly quality. You are aware that once, within that shell, a living person moved, breathed, and perhaps faced battle. Now it is only form, hollow and silent. Beyond weapons and armor, another mystery lingers in the spiritual world of the samurai. For all their discipline and training, samurai were also shaped by unseen beliefs, by Buddhism, by Shinto, and by the quiet philosophy of Zen. They visited shrines nestled among trees where the air smelled of pine and incense, and the sound of running water merged with the murmuring of prayers. Imagine a samurai kneeling on the wooden floor of a temple hall. Sunlight filters through open doors, catching dust motes in the air. A bell tolls slowly, its deep sound resonating through the wooden beams. In that moment, the warrior is not a fighter, but a seeker of calm. Zen meditation in particular influenced their way of life. Sitting motionless for long stretches, focusing on breath and silence, the samurai practiced the same discipline of stillness that guided their actions in combat. To study Zen was to learn to act without hesitation, to strike when needed, and to return again to stillness. It might surprise us that the same men who trained with swords also engaged deeply in tea ceremonies and poetry. But for the samurai, beauty and discipline were inseparable. Picture a small tea room, tatami mats on the floor, sliding paper doors closed against the outside world. A host kneels, carefully preparing tea. The sound of water boiling is soft, almost like wind through reeds. Each gesture is slow, deliberate. The whisk in the bowl, the pouring of tea into cups. The guests drink in silence, savoring not just the flavor, but the pause, the stillness created by the ritual. Poetry, too, was part of this life. A samurai might compose a verse on the sight of cherry blossoms falling in spring, or the lonely cry of a bird in winter. Short, simple, and fleeting, these poems echoed the fragility of life itself. Some warriors even left poems at the moment of death, their final words taking the form of carefully chosen lines. Archaeologists today sometimes uncover graves of samurai. Within them, objects are found: a sword, a helmet, perhaps a lacquered box or a scroll. Each discovery is a window, but also a puzzle. Why was this sword buried here rather than passed down? What did this object mean to the one who carried it? The answers are not always clear, and so the mystery lingers. Even the remains of castles tell quiet stories. Stone foundations still stand where wooden halls have long vanished. Moss grows across steps where once warriors walked. From these ruins, historians piece together fragments of daily life: storerooms, kitchens, barracks, the practical spaces that supported the rituals of power. What endures most is not the clamor of battles, but the quieter echoes, the care of objects, the discipline of rituals, the patience of practice, the sword in its sheath, the armor repaired and worn again, the scroll rolled up and stored, the tea bowl passed gently from hand to hand. These mysteries remind us that the samurai were not only fighters, but human beings who sought meaning in both struggle and stillness. Their world was one of contrasts: harsh duties balanced with delicate rituals, violence tempered with poetry, silence resting beside sound. And so, as we leave behind the objects and rituals, we turn now to the contrasts of daily life, between the samurai, their lords, and the peasants who supported them. Through this, we glimpse the wider society that framed their existence. To fully understand the samurai, we must imagine them not in isolation, but as part of a larger world. Feudal Japan was shaped like a ladder with rungs carefully arranged. At the top stood the shogun, the supreme military ruler, supported by great lords known as daimyo. Below them were the samurai, sworn to service. Beneath the samurai were farmers, who produced the rice that sustained all. Then came artisans, who shaped goods with their hands, and merchants, who traded and carried wealth, yet often ranked lowest in honor. This order was more than hierarchy. It was seen as the natural balance of society. Each class had its duties, its burdens, and its quiet rhythms. And yet within this structure life was never as rigid as the lines drawn on paper. The boundaries blurred, softened by daily necessity and by human need. Let us picture the samurai once more, standing at the edge of a rice field. The land spreads before him in neat rows, water shimmering in the afternoon sun. Bent figures move through the flooded earth, planting seedlings by hand. Their clothes are coarse, their sandals soaked, their lives bound to the cycle of the seasons. For the peasant, life was toil. Each day began with the rising sun and ended with exhaustion shaped by planting, tending, and harvesting. Rice was not only food but the currency of the age. It was measured, stored, and used to calculate the wealth of lords and warriors alike. The samurai's stipend was often paid not in coins, but in rice collected from these very fields. Here we see a contrast, the warrior with his sword and the farmer with his hoe, and yet their fates were bound together. Without the peasant's labor, the samurai's household could not stand. Without the samurai's protection, the farmer's fields might be lost to bandits or rival lords. Duty flowed both ways, even if unequally. Just beyond the fields, in towns clustered near castle walls, lived the artisans. Their days were spent at the workbench, shaping wood, hammering metal, weaving silk. Imagine a swordsmith, his forge glowing in the dim light of early evening. Sparks leap from the steel with each strike of his hammer. He works in rhythm, the sound ringing like a heartbeat through the workshop. His labor, though humble in status, creates the very weapon that defines the samurai. Elsewhere, a carpenter planes smooth a piece of cedar for a temple beam, the shavings curling gently to the floor. A lacquer worker applies layer upon layer of dark polish to a box, each coat drying in silence before the next is added. These artisans lived lives of quiet focus, and though ranked lower than warriors, their craft was essential to the beauty and function of samurai life. Then there were the merchants, ranked lowest in theory, yet often rising in influence. By tradition they were seen as living off the labor of others, producing nothing themselves. Yet, as time passed, many merchants grew wealthy, moving goods across regions, trading rice, silk, and sake. Their homes became large, their lifestyles refined. The samurai, bound by codes of frugality and honor, sometimes borrowed money from the very merchants they were taught to disdain. Here lies another contrast. The official order of society said one thing, but the reality of daily life quietly reshaped it. Even within the samurai class, life varied greatly. A high-ranking retainer in a lord's castle might live surrounded by polished floors, painted screens, and formal gardens. His duties were more administrative, his household larger, his evenings filled with rituals of etiquette and official gatherings. But most samurai lived more modestly, in wooden houses with tatami mats and small gardens. Their lives were closer to those of farmers, filled with routine, family duties, and careful stewardship of land. They were bound by the same codes as the elite, but without the grandeur of wealth. And so the samurai world was layered even within itself, ranging from refined elegance to quiet simplicity. We should pause here too to consider the women of the samurai class. While men trained with the sword, women often managed the home. They oversaw the household accounts, directed servants if the family had them, and ensured that order extended into every corner of daily life. Some women were also trained in martial defense, often with the naginata, a long-bladed polearm. This was not to seek battle, but to protect the home in times of danger. More often, women expressed discipline through calligraphy, poetry, and the subtle arts of maintaining harmony within the household. Imagine a samurai wife kneeling by a writing desk, brush in hand. Outside, cicadas hum in the summer heat. She writes a poem about the brief life of blossoms or the sound of rain on the roof. Her world is bounded by walls, but within those walls she shapes culture, order, and continuity. When we step back, we see how the rhythms of each class intertwined. The farmer rose before dawn to bend once more over the fields. The artisan spent long hours shaping wood or metal, hands worn yet steady. The merchant traveled or counted coins, balancing risk with opportunity. The samurai trained, mediated, served, and maintained dignity. All moved through the same cycles of morning and evening, through the same seasons of rice planting and harvest, through the same fleeting joys of spring blossoms and autumn moonlight. Their lives were different, yet bound together by necessity, by duty, and by the quiet repetition of time. In this contrast lies the deeper truth of the samurai world, that no life, no matter how elevated, stood apart. The sword was nothing without the field that produced rice. The castle was nothing without the hands that built it. And the society itself endured not through the deeds of warriors alone, but through the harmony of all these roles, woven together like threads of a single fabric. And so we draw near the end of our journey. We have walked through the daily rhythms of samurai life, followed the story of Musashi, explored the mysteries of artifacts and rituals, and now stood among the contrasts of society. All that remains is to return to the present, gently reflecting on what lingers from these quiet lives of the past. And so, our long journey comes to a close. We have wandered through the daily rhythms of samurai life, walked alongside a single figure in his path of discipline, touched the quiet mysteries of their culture, and contrasted their lives with those of farmers, artisans, merchants, and lords. What emerges is not the clamor of battle or the flash of steel, but the steady rhythm of existence. The samurai were men and women of order, bound by duty and ritual. Their days began with the rising sun and ended with lantern light fading into night. Between those 2 points stretched meals of rice and soup, the steady practice of the sword, the brush gliding across paper, and the quiet murmur of family life. They lived in a world where beauty and hardship were inseparable. Cherry blossoms fell as battles raged. Poems were written in the same hands that wielded weapons. The simplicity of rice planting was bound to the grandeur of castles. Even in lives shaped by discipline, there was room for tea shared in silence, for a poem whispered at dusk, for the contemplation of the moon. As you reflect now, resting in the comfort of your present moment, notice the contrast between their world and yours. The tatami mats have given way to your bed. The flicker of an oil lantern has become the soft glow of electric light. The long journeys by foot or horse have become distant memories, replaced by ease and speed unimaginable to them. And yet, some rhythms remain timeless. The rising of the sun, the quiet satisfaction of order, the beauty of stillness, the fleeting joy of blossoms and the turning of seasons. Perhaps the lesson the samurai leave us is not in the sharpness of their swords, but in the steadiness of their lives. To move with calm, to live with dignity, to find balance between effort and rest, discipline and beauty. Now, as this story closes, you can allow the images to dissolve. Wooden houses, silent armor, fields of rice in the sun, a samurai at practice, a brushstroke across paper, a family gathered for a simple meal. These images belong to another time, and they can drift softly away like mist lifting from a quiet field in morning light. Let yourself breathe deeply. Let the calm rhythm of history merge with the calm rhythm of your own body, your own thoughts, your own breath. The samurai world has receded, leaving only stillness, only quiet. Rest now. The past is at peace, and so are you.